Okay, welcome back everybody. Thanks for being here. Another amateur video from yours truly as I try and talk about stuff that I really don't know what the hell I'm talking about. And this was a difficult video for me to make because I'm starting to hit a wall with my own knowledge about some of this stuff. So I really wanted my channel to be a bit like this, for the gold to be in the comment section rather than actually the video content itself. So I do ramble on, so I'm going to try and keep that to a minimum today because we've got quite a lot to get through. This is something that seems to be a bit of a hot topic at the moment, which is medium format or digital medium format versus full frame. I also call this baby medium format as another way of saying digital medium format because the 645 system, whether it be 645D or Z from Pentax or the GFX 645, they are smaller than film 645 and smaller than 6.7 and obviously large format. So if you hear me refer to medium format in this video, I am specifically talking about baby medium format in this context and digital medium format. And we've got a lot to go through. The specifics I have to test with is the 645D going against the Pentax K1. And really, honestly, there's pros and cons to each, I think, but you don't even need a comparison to know that the K1 is a lighter camera. Its specifications are better than the 645D. Really, the only thing the 645D has over the K1 is that it has a larger sensor. Let's just get straight into it. I've divided up this kind of comparison into three sections. We're first going to look at medium format vibe and explore what I mean by that. And we're going to compare the two together and see if there really is a strong medium format vibe coming from the 645 against the full frame. We're going to look at the colors, color difference, because this 645D is a CCD sensor. This is something I get asked a lot about in private messages. People know I have both cameras and they want to know a little bit about the colors. So we're going to touch upon that, but there's problems with that as well. And we'll get into that later on. And lastly, we're going to look at the sort of dynamic range and image quality between the two camera systems. So it's just those three sections is what we're going to look at today. Okay, so let's get to it and we'll do some comparison shots and have a look at, we'll start with the medium format vibe. Okay, before we go on, first of all, we've got to sort of talk about this medium format vibe. And so we're both on the same page as to what I'm really talking about and referring to that. Recently, I saw an interesting YouTube video from DP Review, and I felt as though they went right off the barking up the wrong tree with that test of medium format full frame APS-C. They were just doing a kind of bokeh test, and I never ever felt as though that had anything really to do with medium format at all. I'm talking about this idea of medium format having this kind of space or depth. Now this is an extreme version of it because this is actually large format. This is some shots from Charlie J. I'll link you his website over here, and he's done a wonderful sort of project, if you like, in his hometown, I think in the Gold Coast here, of some portraits of people, friends, and their environments. Now, with these images, I think you can see that there's subject isolation, but the background is not blown to pieces with, to smithereens with bokeh. It's still detailed, it's still textured. You can still get an idea of where they are and what's going on. And that's kind of the medium format vibe, excuse me, that I'm talking about. Here's a shot from Barney Arthur. This is on a Pentax 6.7. So again, we're going to really much different kind of sensor or film plane than the 645 digital. Something for you to be aware of. But yeah, I mean, if you go through here, you'll find it common time and time again. You'll get a nice subject isolated, and but the background have context. And I think that really is the kind of medium format look for me. It's easier to see on some images than others. Again, this one here, we really have this subject punched out massively from the scene, but we can still tell it's even the text. It's Ridley Stores, I think, behind there. So we've got context to the environment, yet the subject is isolated, and it's something quite indifferent to say this kind of look here, which is kind of full frame. This is just a random shot I found on Flickr with a Nikon D800 and a 200 f2. Okay, so this is very different. I think the bokeh is just very pronounced, and I've never ever felt that this look was a medium format look, and I actually felt that full frame does this stuff a lot better if that's your vibe. I don't particularly like it that much, but if that's your vibe, then that's medium format look. And here's some shots I've just done with my own system. This is with the Pentax 645D. A couple of shots I felt I really got that kind of medium format vibe from. This shot here of my friend Rob and Alan here, just the way this whole scene, it renders a kind of depth and a space and a breathing room within the image that I felt struggles a little bit more with APS-C and K1, full frame K1. But that's not to say that you can't get that as well from those systems. It's just a little bit harder. Again, these are just sort of more samples here, full body portrait, and it just feels as though, again, this is my better half, that we have this, you know, we've got context environment. We can see there's a car there, the street, but she's really got a very strong 3D vibe punched out of the scene. And even when you go in close, so like something a little bit more macro-like or close photography, there's a lot of depth and breathing space that I felt, you know, had that vibe. Sometimes you have to, you know, zoom in a little bit as well to get that feeling. But yeah, excuse me, these ones as well, though. When I did put up my COVID test, people did say they saw a real medium format kind of look to these images as well. Maybe it's just the way the space is rendered in the car, the rooftop in relation to me and my big gob. Yeah, and this is my friend Mick, and you can see here kind of a vibe going on. Again, some cosplay stuff. So it's hard. I definitely feel like I can see it in this shot as well. The way that it's just got a 3D surrealness to it without relying on bokeh completely. We can see the valleys textured and layered here, the tree, the brick wall, but we can feel like there's a lot of space there in that image. Okay, so that is the medium format vibe, and I think the biggest proof in all of this is that in the full frame world or APS-C world, there's the Brennezer method. Brennezer method from the photographer Ryan Brennezer, a wedding photographer, who does basically people bokeh panoramas, and you try and stitch multiple images of a person and create that kind of depth. It's trying to mimic that sensor. That is what I think is the kind of medium format look. So I think it's a really important point of talk with this comparison, because really this is about the only advantage to having a 645D over the full frame. And in fact, on any system, if you consider the GFX range of equipment, the GFX, for the price, it's good value. Yes, it's medium format, has good IQ and dynamic range, but when you compare spec for spec against a full frame camera of a similar price range, the full frame is going to blow it out the water for things like autofocus performance, frames per second, buffer, you know, the list goes on and on. So you really have to understand and enjoy this kind of look from these types of cameras. The interesting thing, what I'm doing is testing to see if full frame can keep up, or is there any difference at all? And my results actually quite shocked me, to be honest. So in this test, we're going to have a look at, I equipped a 645D with a DFA 55 f2.8. And on the K1, I put the FA43 1.9. And I think I can't emphasize this enough. The FA43 1.9 is actually quite a special type of lens that actually can do very well with providing this type of medium format look on full frame. I think my results could be quite different if I had a different lens on and not this particular lens. So I think we need to give credit where credit's due. So I don't think it's all equal with all lenses on full frame system, and some will struggle a little bit more than others. But those two cameras, those two camera bodies with those lenses, they give a very similar field of view. All I've done is crop the full frame shots from 3.2 down to 4.3 so we can compare a little bit easier. But I'm not going to do any game playing with you where I'm going to hide which image is which and you have to vote to you know, decide which one is which. We're not going to do anything like that. We're just going to compare. So now we'll dive into Lightroom, and we're going to first look at medium format vibe. And that's why I want you to concentrate on this section. We're not going to look at, don't start questioning IQ yet, or dynamic range, or colors. Let's just focus solely on whether you feel as though the vibe is actually significantly different between the two systems. Okay, let's do that. Okay, so here we are, back in Lightroom with the files. Now, first of all, I'll just walk you through what's going on here a little bit. there's color differences, and so in order for us to do this test, I decided to try and sort the colors out between the two cameras and match them as best as I could, so we can just really just concentrate on that medium format vibe. So right now you're seeing this 645D file on the left as a JPEG taken with the same settings that the K1 was taken. On the right is a virtual copy of this file with the colors steered more towards the Pentax. So we're just going to make that one now the reference image, and we're going to bring up the Pentax one. So now these two should look a little bit similar for color, dynamic range, and things like that, so we can just assess the image. And that's it, really. I mean, we're at the moment f2.8 on the 645D on the left, and we are at f2 with a FA43 on the right. And that is it, really. We've obviously cropped in on 3.2 to 4.3. It's a case of whether you are really feeling as though between these two images, they're one screaming at you saying, this was medium format vibe, and the other one saying, I'm full frame. And for me, not really any difference, to be honest. I'm not feeling that much. It's one of these things I was trying to say earlier. It really feels like there's a variety of situation things have to happen in order for that vibe to really occur in the first place. The right aperture, the right distance to the subject, and things like that. And I felt as though shots like this, it really wasn't looking that indifferent when you start matching everything. We'll have another look at another one. Let's have this one on the left here. I don't know, and again, I don't know how much this is going to really come through very well on YouTube. So I'll just have to wait and see as well. So again, I've done my best to just try and match these. We have on the left the 645D f2.8 and the FA43 on the right, and the focus is basically on this object here, and is one really screaming at you medium format versus the other. I'll just take away distractions there. What I might do actually is just disable my little video for a moment here and go full screen, which is I do that. That's right. Come back in here and then full screen. There you go. I mean, I can tell that the 645D, I think, is rendering the out of focus areas a little bit more blurry than the K1, but really not a huge difference at this point in time. They both feel like they could have been shot with either 645 or the K1. I wouldn't really know the difference, especially if I just even chose some slightly different apertures. So for me, this is one of those ones where you know, it doesn't really matter. You know, it just feels as though, hang on, I'll just put me back. It feels as though I'm not really seeing a difference. So I saw that. I was quite shocked actually, because I've done a few shots with 645D and really felt that sense of space and depth. I just really wasn't getting it in this particular sample. It is what it is. Let's have another look now. We'll have a full body shot. Okay. Just me in my back garden. Again, I've just tried to steer the colors to be in the same. These are the JPEGs. We've got the 645 on the left here, f2.8, and again Pentax K1 on the right at f2. And you're just looking again, does one really feel as though it's much more medium format like than the other? I can tell, I think it feels as though the book is a little bit more pronounced here than here, but I mean, you can zoom in as well, get an idea. I was using face detection as well here, and we'll get into IQ later on, but you know, it looks a little bit softer here. The 645D, credit where credit due, that's just a single AF point on my body at f2.8. It does look like it's done a little bit of a better job. But in terms of just that feel, that vibe, not really feeling it from this. So I thought that was quite interesting, because I've had this camera a long time now, and the reason I haven't really done a 645D versus K1 test is because as soon as I picked up the camera and started shooting with it, I was like, oh yeah, I'm seeing the medium format vibe, and I was seeing the nice IQ, and I could see the colors are different. They're different, and that just put me off from really doing this video at all, because I just felt as though I was getting the actual results anyway. But I think sometimes there is a little bit of that new toy syndrome comes in. And you've done something, you bought something, and you feel like you have to justify your purchase. So I really should have done this test a long time ago, because I think it's actually quite interesting. And lastly, I think I've just got a kind of closer up shot here So here we go again, and we are on, bring it up again, same. Left is the 645D, the right is the K1 full frame. And if we go full screen, I don't know if I'm there yet, but again, are you really feeling as though one is more pronounced, one is given a stronger medium format vibe than the other? Because I gotta say, it's not really that apparent to me. They're both extremely close. It is what it is. So I do have some other apertures that I could go through, but I've already done it myself and went through, because I shot at f2, f2.8 with the K1, f5.6, and so on and so forth. And believe me, the results didn't really change that much. It just didn't feel as though I was managing on this particular day to really derive that kind of full frame, medium format look. And I thought it was really interesting, because I really actually did think I would be able to do something. But like I said, I showed you samples before. I showed you samples where I feel as though there is that rendering, that depth and that space. But maybe I would have got that as well with a K1 if I chose the right settings for that with the FA43 attached. It is what it is. I'm not, I was surprised. I really thought the 645D would punch me out the scene a lot more in that kind of medium format look and vibe. But really, when it came down to it, I really wasn't feeling as though it was or it could. And if it's going to work, my experience has been wide open is going to do that, punch out that vibe more than stop down. So it is what it is. And so I don't know how I feel about this. This is one of those videos that's been hard to do because it's hard to really come to concrete conclusions here about the two systems. So we'll leave it there for medium format vibe. But for me, I think if you got a K1 and you got the FA limiteds, it's probably enough. I think if there is a difference with the 645D, I can't talk for the 645Z because I don't have that camera. But in terms of 645D, and you're striving for that medium format look, it's close. So close you might not even notice it. And it may just be something that happens occasionally. And I just didn't get those. It's like ingredients making a cake. If you get the right quantities and the right ingredients and the right mix, bang, there's your medium format look. And if you don't get that, bang, it just kind of looks like full frame. That's my conclusion, honestly. So next up, we're going to look at colors. Okay, colors. This was a lot harder to actually compare than I first thought. This is where it's starting to show, the 645D is starting to show its age a little bit. It's not as supported as more recent cameras. So yeah, I got a few problems here, so I just want to highlight them. Let's have a look over here. On the left, both of these images are from the 645D. And on the left, we've got the JPEG, and on the right, we've got the RAW file. Now, we will notice that the one on the right has darker shadows, a little bit more contrasty. That's because the shadow recovery that I had as a setting that I took at the time is only baked into the JPEG on the left here. So it's not carried across onto the RAW. So that accounts for some kind of color shift here. But the big difference, big problem is, we'll see over here, is a profile that's given back is just Adobe Color. There is no camera matching profiles for the 645D. And that makes it kind of difficult because as I was setting up for the shots, I shot RAW and JPEG, so we can have a look at the JPEGs just against the K1 and the 645D. But when it comes to RAW, it's a little bit difficult because Lightroom will actually camera match the K1, but it won't with the 645D. Anyway, settings were, off the top of my head, we had daylight for both, which is quite interesting as well because I believe that the white balance is actually different for both cameras. I thought daylight was a fixed Kelvin of 5000 on these cameras, but there may be a little bit of a wiggle in there depending on what's going on to give different values. I'm not too sure. But if we just have a look here, let's put this one as a reference photo. So we've got the RAW on the left of the 645D. If we bring up the K1 file, which is this one, I think, here. Yes, you can see here, I've done the crop, no other adjustments, left it camera natural. So we're seeing something different. So to be fair, we should really probably put the K1 into Adobe Color. So they are both now RAW files with Adobe Color taken with the same white balance with daylight in camera. Same shadow recovery, although that's not carried across to the raw. And we can see again, there's a shift in the white balance here. The last one was 5,200, we're down at 5,000. So slight difference there. But I think you can see that there's a difference between these two images straight away. We can see that the 645D is definitely pushing these yellows and greens that are in the foliage much harder. They're a lot more vibrant. The orange here feels a lot more orangey yellowy. Over here feels a little bit more kind of magenta and red tones, if you like, with the greens far more subdued. Now, you might like that more. I'm just showing at the moment, it feels as though it is a little bit amped up and might not be what you actually want, but it does feel like it's the colors are quite rich on the 645D and amped up. Even the water down here, the blue down the corner, a little bit stronger than on the right. And I also noticed exposure differences in the field quite significant. So I was always going by the histogram and not trying to blow a highlight anywhere, things like that. And sometimes the difference with the EV bias and the settings between the two could be quite large to come up with similar excess. So this was a high dynamic range shot. Well, we won't get into dynamic range here. We'll just try and keep the colors for now. Let's just have a look at the JPEGs. So if we have the 645 JPEG on the left, we can see that's reduced to contrast a little bit because that shadow recovery is there. Now let's have a look at the K1 with the same shadow recovery. So these were taking, you know, absolutely with the same settings. We're looking at camera natural profile in the cameras, no fudgery, no messing around there, white balance of daylight, and shadow recovery 2 out of 3. Highlight correction was on, which meant that both are base ISO of 200. And these shots here, I think it's f8 and f5.6. It's not quite the same, but it's close on the two systems to get roughly about the same. So we can see there's definitely a difference, I think, to be seen there on these JPEGs. All right, let's have a look at some more. Down here, same sort of thing again. We've got let's have a look at the RAW of the 645D on the left, and we'll get the Pentax RAW on the right, which is this one, I think. Yeah, so TMT for the 645D, and DNG IMG for the K1. And again we can see definite differences. It looks again like there's a kind of color shift, that these oranges in the rock here, they're more yellowy. The tree foliage is more yellowy, and we have a little bit more of a kind of magenta. The green's sitting back a little bit on the K1, and again the orange is different. This is camera natural though, remember, so we need to toggle it to Adobe Color to be a little bit more fairer. So they're both on Adobe Color now, because of the 645D cannot do camera matching, so it gets put onto Adobe Color as default. So there we go, that's a little bit more even, and you can see the differences. And you can even see, I've not even changed any settings here, but I think you can see into shadows a little bit more on the 645D natively, and it's a little bit more contrasty and darker on the K1. That felt very reflected in the field and quite accurate to being, you know, I think you can see it down here as well. I tried to get the histogram as close to the same for each one. So at the moment, this is the histogram for the K1 file. If you just remember that, we'll have a look at what it is for the 645D. So yeah, you can see not too different a shift. I'm not blowing anything there, but there is differences there. I think it is a little bit brighter. It's just the way it's handling that. And if again we look at the JPEGs, so these now are both just JPEGs. Let's just confirm that. Yep. And we got f8 on the 645 and 5.6 on the K1, f5.6, and we can definitely see, you know, those differences in tones. Okay. And then it occurred to me, I've got the X-Rite Color Passport, so I can do an actual direct comparison here with how these things are working. So here we'll put the RAW there and here. So on the left we have the 645D, and on the right we have the Pentax K1. We'll take it out of camera natural and put it on Adobe Color, and that's as close as you can get. And it is odd because I think you can see there's kind of more of a green tint here going on in the background. My background is more this color, this kind of gray, than on the right. So I'm not even sure that 645D is necessarily more accurate, but I'll be lying if, you know, without any kind of correction here going on, the 645D does look richer. I think all of these colors look far more richer on the left than they do on the right. Could be at a slight exposure difference. If you ask me, the K1 here looks to be a little bit brighter. So I'll just pull that down a little bit. It might make those colors punch out a little bit more. But ultimately, there is a difference there. Now, what I have actually done is I can actually create an X-Rite Color Passport 2 profile, which I've done. And these were shot at 4000K white balance, which is why it's called that. So I'll just click that there, and you can see the difference, and it has made those colors a lot richer. Let's just do a little before and after. So you can see that without and with. And it's interesting, I think, if you have a look at this now, these two colors here, they do feel like they're getting more in line with the 645D. In fact, all of these colors, I think, starting to closely mimic the 645D. And I felt this in the field when I had this camera. It felt as though almost like the 645D natively was vibrant or more color accurate. Now, I've kind of contradicted myself there, because I said before that it wasn't getting the right kind of colors here in the back there to how they really were. It's an odd camera, and also if you got to be a little bit careful in the field as well. I found with the colors, when you're pushing colors around the slider with a 645D, things can go weird quite quickly. The K1 color files feels like they've got more pliability. You can move them around a lot more than the 645D. But out of the camera, it definitely does feel like 645D is rich. Now, again, we can have a look at the JPEGs just to show. We'll put this one on the left and this one on the right. So now we're looking at the JPEGs, and these were, we don't have to camera match profiles here. They're just JPEGs, same settings, same white balance on each of them. And you can have a look at the difference in them. You know, that green tint is still there. However, between the two, I still feel as though, you know, that 645D does seem to push those colors slightly stronger than what the K1 can do natively. What's interesting is trying to do a color X-Rite color profile for the 645D doesn't work. It just falls over. Check this out. Strange. I don't know why it is. It never did it. I think I'm on Windows 11. There is some note about the X-Rite calibration tool not working very well with Windows 11, and they're looking into it. That could be what's going on here. It was okay with the K1. It's not working with the 645D, but even when I used an old one that I'd made before on Windows 10, it's still not getting the colors right at all. So I don't know quite what's going on with that. It's got to be a CCD sensor with the 645D. You're not going to be able to profile it easily. I reached out to them months ago. They still haven't got back to me. It's a strange one, but it is what it is. But straight out of camera, careful about color manipulation. Yeah, the 645D is vibrant and lovely. There's no doubt about it. I don't know how well it translates to, you know, skin tones and things like that. That's an interesting point, because I think only just recently did Capture One start supporting 645Z files. I think that was only last year. There's no official release for 645D, but I believe 645D is supported now in Capture One as well. But I don't really know how the skin tones, if they're any better or anything like that. But just in terms of just general colors, I'm going to hand it to the 645D. There's definitely a richness going on there, some strength in those colors natively, which is quite nice to see. There has been times I've you know, brought up the raw file and mistakenly thought I was working from the JPEG, because it is just that much in your face. Compared to some of the raw files that I work with the K1, they can feel a bit flatter and duller. They've got great, you can move them into life, there's no problems there. Just that starting point can feel a bit duller, whereas 645D feels like it's already well and truly on its way to a quite powerful look. All right, so that really brings us to the end of colors. For me, there is a difference. CCD sensor definitely is doing colors different from CMOS. I'm not sure it has as wide a maneuverability for color manipulation than the CMOS on the K1, but it's definitely, I don't think it's hearsay. I think that it's factual. You can see it in the files. All right, so lastly, we're going to look at dynamic range and IQ. Okay, let's try and wrap this up then. Dynamic range and image quality comparison between the two cameras. What we have up here is we'll stay with the 645 on the left here and the K1 on the right. This is shot at f2.8 with the 55 and f2. The focus is on roughly this flat surface area. Both doing pretty good, really, to be honest. I'm not seeing a significant winner. The K1, you can see the color shifts and tints a bit different. I have adjusted values here a little bit just so we can make these image quality comparisons at this point in time easier to see. I haven't just bothered with colors, that's all. But you can see, I think they're both holding up. They're about the same. I mean, it's hard to say. They're both similar. I could have focus off slightly. We're talking very thin depths of field here at this point in time. But I don't think either one is really more pronounced or sharper than the other at the moment. So that was 2.8. Let's go to f5.6 for DFA on the left. Actually, we'll stay with the we'll stay with it on 2.8. Let's have a look at the Pentax K1 at 2.8 instead. So now it's jumped up to 2.8. And I think we can see that already. Maybe quite a bit of an improvement there on the K1. I'm starting to. It starts to look like at 2.8. It's beating the DFA 55 at 2.8. I know you kind of would expect that a little bit. It's stopping down now. Okay, now let's have f5.6 on the DFA 55. Actually, let's just compare that against 2.8. Big difference. I think it's starting to look like now the DFA is running away. The DFA, when I say the DFA, I mean DFA 55, i.e. the 645D, is starting to run away with the image quality. Really quite sharp here indeed, with the K1 looking soft at 2.8. But it's an unfair battle. Let's take the K1 up. Let's take it to 5.6 as well now. It's better. It's improved. Still not caught up. We can take it to f8. And this is a bit more comparable. And there you go. I would say it's probably not still there. I would say, and I think I've noticed this as well in the field, when you get the sweet spot of the 645D optical lens performance, it's insanely good. It's very, very good indeed. I think here we're just witnessing 645D really having some strengths there. If we go to f11 on the K1, it's starting, I think, not to be quite as good as f8. But here's where it gets interesting. I took an f8 shot and I pixel shifted it. And I think at this point in time, things are starting to look a little bit better now. It's still possibly not even caught up to the 645D. But here's where it does get interesting when it comes to things like dynamic range. So you'll have seen already, I've tinkered around with the exposure and shadows here on this K1 file, just to mimic a little bit more like the 645D. If you want to have a look at what the 645D is doing there, it's 5.6. I've actually done nothing at all except bring highlights down a little bit. Okay, so that's what it's just capturing naturally, whereas the 645D is needing a little bit of shadow lift there. Let's have a look at the quality down here though. Let's maybe come out a little bit, not quite as zoomed in. Maybe a bit more than that, 50%. Okay, I'll do. Let's bring up let's do this with the 645D first. We're going to do a shadow recovery kind of test. So let's bring up these shadows. Okay, let's max it out. And let's bring up the exposure a little bit, just to see what kind of noise. You can actually see a line going through here. Don't know if you can see that tear. That is just a bit of sensor problems with my 645D. I'm not too entirely sure what causes it, but I think it's some kind of sensor failure beginning of. Again, another thing to be wary of. You know, you buy a 2010 camera, even mine doesn't even have a high shutter count. It's under 10,000, but still showing some issues like this. That might be troublesome. But you can get an idea here of the kind of noise that you get in the shadows with that file. Let's just have a larger look at it. Okay. 645D. with quite a lot. So we were at 98 and 100. Now let's have a look at the same with a 645D that's pixel shifted. All right, so we're going to max the shadows out, and we are going to 98, wasn't it? Boom, 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 and there you go. That's the difference, okay? And this is why pixel shift is so useful. We'll go to 100%. By the way, do you see these little weird patterns up here? What that is, that's the glimmering, shining reflection of the water hidden in the rock. And because it's pixel shifted and there's motion, that's what it's doing there. So you would have to deal with that in post. You can see it also the artifacts in the water there. But ignore that for a moment and just look at the difference in the shadow quality and noise. When you increase exposure, you can push it really quite high, and we're still not getting anywhere near the kind of noise. If we compare that, let's just put it back to 98 at the moment. If we compare that with a non-pixel shifted f8 shot, which would be over here, I think. Yep, this is the f8 shot. And we'll come down here, same area again, and we put shadows to max, 98. And it's doing pretty good as well. Not as good as a pixel shifted file, but you can see it's significantly better though, isn't it? You can actually see a few little hotspots. I think maybe pixel shift helps resolve some of those things as well. So if we could put that one now on the left and compare against a pixel shifted file, we should see it's taken a while. So we can see the pixel shifted file has much cleaner shadows than the standard one. So again, if we start maxing this out now, 177, and we have a look at the normal pixel, the non-pixel shifted one, and 177. There you go, big difference. And that there, folks, is why you might want to use pixel shift occasionally when you do landscape work, because you're going to have much cleaner shadow recovery. So, I mean, overall, let's just reset that back. My summary here really is that the 645D is good out of the box, but the K1's far more superior for image quality and dynamic range recovery, especially in the shadows if you utilize that pixel shift. And even if you don't utilize the pixel shift, increasing the shadows is cleaner. Let's just have a look. Couple little shots here. Have a look at these ones. So this is f2.8 versus the K1 at f2. I think we have had a look at this earlier. Really quite respectable image quality from the 645D. They're pretty close. I think this is a little bit softer and this is a little bit sharper. And you have to give credit to the 645D for getting that out of the box, because this had face detection. So it threw focus right there, whereas the 645D, I've just got an AF point probably hidden my chest there, or chin maybe. So to actually get that kind of level of IQ is pretty good. We do see some more, whatever you call it. Let's just make this one, you know, and we'll swap them around. Whereas the K1 is on the left here. You can see it's not as much there. But it's quite bad here. We'd have to maybe get a filter out, cover that up, and then you know, deal with that in post. All right, let's have a look at some other ones. This is at 5.6 with the 645D, and we'll have a K1 file up here, 5.6 as well. My system's really struggling now. I can feel my fans kicking in. And the image quality, see, not even rendering it. Okay. Very respectable. F5.6 on both. Excellent image quality. Probably not fair comparison. Probably want to go to about F8 or something like that on the K1. This one's F8 on the 645D and F5.6. Let's have a look at that. So if you compare the bokeh, roughly about the same out of focus area on the two, between the two frames. Now we're 5.6 on the K1 and f8 on the 645D, and yeah, both really quite good, both excellent. But yeah, that's it really. I mean, that's it for the whole video. I'll give my summary in a second. Let me gather my thoughts, and I'll do a summary. Okay, running out of light, natural light anyway, and I can't be bothered to get the studio lights out, so we'll just try and wrap this up. Yeah, it's really interesting to have done that test. I almost feel as though maybe I underestimated just how good the FA43 really is as a lens on that K1. Feels like it was keeping up quite a lot. Almost feels like I'm kind of doubling up on systems in some ways. What I do like about the 645D is not having to use an L plate, having that dual mount. I wish they would do that more in full frames. I wouldn't mind taking my mounting plate off to get access to, you know, the cable port or something on the full frame, and just having that screw hole there. That would be so much better, I think, than these L brackets that we have. But I like the 645D and I like the DFA 55 because it's weather sealed. So for some of my landscape works, if it's a wet day, that's probably the camera I'm going to choose to go out with because I've got that weather sealed lens. Whereas the FA Limited, as much as I love them, they are only going to be useful in the dry. I have shot with them in the rain and it involves umbrellas and all sorts of stuff. It's just, you know, really annoying. But look, it's an interesting comparison I wish I'd done earlier. It feels as though I'm kind of doubling up. I've got two cameras that are really quite comparable for image quality. I'm going to have a lot more, you know, the K1 is without a doubt the better camera overall. It's far more versatile with that LCD screen as well. I mean, in the field, doing those wide open shots at f2.8 and trying to nail focus on something without a live view screen to, you know, magnify in and confirm critical forces is an absolute pain and an absolute nightmare. So there's no way around it. The 645D is crippled. It's a difficult camera to use, but it doesn't mean it's a bad camera. It's actually quite a fun camera to use. You really feel like a photographer when you're using it. Waiting 3 seconds to see an image after you've taken it, it's annoying, but I've learned to live with it, and in some ways just treat it like a film camera and don't look at your images until you get home. It's quite a fun way to shoot, but as a camera, K1 I think overall wins this one. I think it's got it beat on dynamic range recovery for sure. Image quality is keeping up with, maybe a little bit behind, but certainly once you engage pixel shift, it's just caught right up. And even can replicate a medium format vibe with at least the FA Limiteds anyway. But having said all of that, I do know that I do get these shots with the 645D that feel like medium format. I just wasn't really able to replicate it for this test, to actually go out and shoot things and replicate. I think maybe just too many things of the similar nature. The colors are lovely natively on the 645D, but I think honestly, for the amount of money it costs right now, I think a 645D is still kicking about $2,000, and I've seen K1s go for less than that. So it feels still quite an expensive camera to pay that much for in 2022. Still probably the cheapest way to buy into medium format digitally, however. But I can't help feeling that the 645Z would be a better camera because it's just got a lot more in common with the K1 than anything else. But go the K1, really, go the K1. But also go the 645D. I mean, it's 2010. I mean, the image quality it's 40 megapixels, and the image quality is insane. Did they even know how good this camera was in 2010? Were there even 2K, 4K, 5K monitors to inspect these images? Kind of makes sense why they have JPEG options in that camera, so you can just get cracking with it. I don't even know if Adobe Lightroom was kicking around in 2010. You know, it's crazy, and it's still doing really quite exceptionally well today for IQ. So yeah, it is what it is. I'm sorry this video isn't more conclusive. You're just going to have to draw your own conclusions from this one, I think. It was quite fun to do, and I think I'll leave it there. Hope you enjoyed it. Thank you very much. Till next time.